Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am your host, Nick, joined by good friend of the pod, Sam, aka CFC Central, who is back with a highly anticipated, I would say, scouting special for Neto. So there's a lot of deep dive that we're going to get into about the strengths, weaknesses, all the sorts of fun things that are going to come through on this episode, as you're used to the scouting episodes that we put out before. However, we do have to do a little bit of plug at the beginning. If you can go to YouTube and hit that old bell icon and subscribe button, that would be fantastic. We are doing some really good work over there right now. We're really proud of it. Trying to become YouTubers a little bit on that front, and it's been a lot of fun to take that on. Join us for those live shows after important matches. 5-star reviews, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Still really helpful because the algorithms are tough to discover within those apps. So those 5-star reviews are great. Of course, Sam writes a wonderful newsletter, and those have been coming out usually Wednesdays, but sometimes Thursdays if we have a Wednesday match. So get in on those. And then, of course, the Discord community is phenomenal. Everyone's having a good time in there with some of the preseason shenanigans that have gone on. But that is the plug out of the way. What we need to do here, Sam, is really dive into Pedro Neto, who this signing really came out of nowhere on Friday the 9th of August. And, right after I talked to Matt Law, it seemed like this was well hidden from the general public. So what are your thoughts about the signing and how quiet it was kept before we dive into the player itself?
Yeah, quite rare for a transfer in our times to go that unnoticed. And I think it was Matt who wrote an article saying that we've been working on Neto for like 2.5 months. And it's quite a wonder that nobody sort of picked up on that, especially because there was heavy interest. Apparently, Tottenham wanted him. There was one source quoting that Manchester City wanted him on the
Yeah.
right-hand side, which was quite intriguing. So yeah, caught me unaware. Again, I was looking at a right-footed left winger, so he wasn't even in my list of names to sort of consider. So quite, I think, left field choice in terms of picking up. In terms of how I rate the signing, I'm still not very certain. I think it's a pretty difficult market. The right wingers are, blooming. They're absolutely abundant. I think there's just pick your quality and you can go to any of the top 8 leagues and you'd find, I would say, like a pretty good high, low risk, high reward kind of signing which you could make and it would yield. With the left wingers, it's been, kind of a big question mark because you have like, I would say Nico Williams, maybe Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. And then after that, there's a huge like drop to the next, whoever it is that you want to sign. So um, in that respect, I think like I mentioned, left field choice. Not really sure if um, it's what we need or how it translates long term. I'm still not certain. I'm not saying this is a bad signing. I'm just still trying to put my thoughts together on it. But yeah, interesting because maybe it's a tactical decision to help sort of Nkunku thrive a little bit as the guy who's moved to the interior in that left half space. We know he's not a wide player as such, but yeah, for the price, I'm a little concerned. It's you don't buy a bench option for 60 million, so he's obviously being earmarked as a starter. And again, like we've all been praying Nick for like a PL proven signing, some kind of experience, and still, young enough to be able to create some sort of an impact. He's 24. He's been here for like 4.5 years now. He's been here, I think, since the 1920 season. So lots of games under his belt. So hopefully that'll hold us in good stead when he, makes his first run out against any opposition. So overall, um, much needed quality. I don't know whether it's value for money or what we need, but quality nonetheless.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because, we've heard all summer, that it's a left-footed right winger, a left-footed right winger, a left-footed right winger. And at the moment, as we went through preseason, I think that, Sterling had fits and starts as it pertained to his performance and offering something from that left side. Mudryk didn't do a whole lot to be candid. And, you look at, Jackson just coming back from injury. We know that he can play out left as a left winger, as we saw under Poch, but, is not really where he's being earmarked to start. And so, it's an interesting balance because Pedro Neto has, featured all over the place for Wolves. I think a little bit more on the left than he did on the right, but he's also played centrally, both as a 10 and as kind of a center forward as well, despite his stature. So it's an interesting signing, and I'm sure one of the areas that we're going to talk about is kind of how he fits in to a already crowded attack, but I wouldn't say that our attack is like bursting at the seams necessarily with guarantees right now. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. Again, when you look at who we have as manager and what the demands are in terms of, expectations from the front four, then obviously, if you're going to hit that top four coveted spot, then you need to be able to guarantee a certain number of goals. And we were super lucky that Palmer had like, an incredible one of a kind season. And we all know that we've got to be realistic enough that there's a good chance it's not repeatable again. Like it doesn't happen next season. So
Yep.
we have to be realistic and supplement those goals from somewhere else. And for all the quality that we've tried to accumulate, say Raheem Sterling, Mikhailo Mudryk, those numbers are not guaranteed, like you mentioned. So, but then again, I look at Neto's numbers and I'm like, okay, this isn't guaranteed either. So,
Yeah.
what was the point? Why not wait and figure out if you could make some sort of an adjustment? I actually like the Nico Jackson and Kunku idea. If you could swap them over, covers a lot of issues. Dan and I discussed this, in the Maraska call, and maybe that's a change that you could make. And you know, me being me, I would have saved money and figured that that would have been, my choice to make. But again, we're in this unique situation where he's had an ankle injury and he's not been fit all preseason. What do you do? And that's the big question. So I think it's one of those challenges that every team faces, and unfortunately, we've been at the receiving end.
Yeah, and I mean, you just mentioned numbers, so I think it's a great place to kind of start the conversation, right? He played 135 games for Wolves, 14 goals, 24 assists, much more of a creator than a pure scorer. He played 44 of those games as a left winger, 5 goals, 6 assists. He played 36 at right winger, 3 goals, 10 assists. So a little bit more balanced on the left than he was on the right. He played a few games at center forward, a few games at second striker, a few games as a 10, with sort of the same results. 4-3, 4-1, 0-2. So it's not as if this is a Cole Palmer type of signing from last year, where Cole Palmer in one season basically equaled his his total output for his entire Wolves career, to put it mildly. But it is an interesting type of player, Sam, because we have seen him play against us and play very well against us. He's obviously an incredibly skillful, tricky winger on the ball, can operate in all sorts of tight spaces. I'll let you do the scouting because this is more of your job. But from a pure eye test perspective, he might offer something different to what we currently have, especially on the left side, as we look to maybe be a little bit more, 20% more clinical in the final third this season.
Yeah, in terms of the unique profile that you highlight, I do think what he does have over any of our other wingers is that he's comfortable across the 5 lanes. So you mentioned a lot of the different positions that he's played, but he's somebody who can hold width on the right hand side, who can function as what people call the half winger, so sort of like that attacking midfielder
Yep.
tucked in behind the center forward. He can do the same as an attacking midfielder, as the same positions on the left hand side if you mirror them. And he's again played high level games in those positions. And we don't have a left winger who, is a conventional left winger, a left-footed left winger, able to give you maybe like stretch the pitch a little bit and create spaces inside between the fullback and the centre back. And Neto's the only one who does that. Madueke can't play left. Palmer can play left, but he's not really a width option on the left. He's somebody who's, again, drifts into those half
Tough game.
spaces, tries to
Yeah.
cross. Yeah. So maybe like he's that kind of a player. But Neto, again, from a profile perspective, unique in that sense. So I'm still not certain whether it's a position that is preferred or is something that he loves. I would love to ask him this face to face, but he does look like his preference or his strongest points come as the right winger, somebody who loves cutting in, and then he can offer you a lot of options. And then he's a very direct player. Like that's one of his standout strengths. He's able to just give you that immediate 1v1 threat. He likes getting on, taking on players. So um, I think that's what is if you want to maximize his output, give him a chance to shoot from that right hand side. I really don't know what he's going to do except maybe stretch the pitch on the left hand side for tactical reasons. So yeah, that's a big question in my head. Unless of course there's another curveball and like Madueke gets shifted to Newcastle and then we suddenly have a slot open on the right hand side. So tough read for me, Nick. I don't know if you get caught out again, but this is how this is how it is for now.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about his strengths before we talk about maybe some of the fit positionally and where he can improve. I mean, you've written down a fair amount of stuff here, and we will come back to it right after the ad break. But we'll talk about things like his directness and dribbling and such. So thank you, the sponsors, for supporting the show, and we'll be right back. All right, Sam, strengths time. Pedro Neto is obviously a player that Chelsea fans have seen many a time from an opposition perspective. He's been at Wolves since 2019, 2020. In that time, it feels like every time he's played against us, he has done something remarkable and or helped his team get a surprise result. Obviously, just the eye test and being a little facetious, but talk about some of Pedro Neto's strengths and where you really see him thriving at Chelsea.
Yeah, I think there's certainly been an evolution in terms of like the kind of player that he is. He arrived as a very promising, electrifying kind of wide man who was able to take on players, but through his time at Wolves and owing to a system where it has a very fluid front three, he's been able to shift himself to the left hand side, play and in those center forward roles, even though like you mentioned, there's not a physical reason for him to be in those positions. But he's played as a centre forward, as a
Yep.
10, and that's given him, I think, an enhanced understanding of what it means to be a forward. I definitely have seen changes in terms of even like his one-footedness. He came as somebody who just loved his left foot, and now you often see him attacking the box, cutting back with his right foot, taking shots with his right foot. So a lot more confidence there, a lot
Yep.
more assuredness in his, I would say, less polished aspects of his play. So the number one thing that stands out for me is just how direct he is. He's a wing wizard, take on artist, and he's again got that verve in terms of he will take on 2v1 situations with ease. He will push through and try to basically attack space in behind. Very, very good at it. And again, in this position that we are in, where you want 1v1 wingers who give you that, superiority on the flanks because you are looking to crowd the central area and the space naturally comes out in wide areas. So you want those players to be able to give you that directness. So from a tactical standpoint versus player fit, very, very good. So I think he'll be very good. Even on the left hand side, I think I've seen enough on the left hand side to suggest that he can offer that 1v1 issue on the other flank as well. And like you and I talked before, I think Nkunku again is a very, very key aspect here. And we'll sort of talk about what the fit is later on. But I was watching the Portugal game versus Georgia, and very interesting thing happened. He sort of played in this hybrid left wing back role. So it was
Hmm.
again Gonzalo Inacio, who's a left center back slash left back at Sporting, and he was playing in kind of the position that Colville played on the left hand side. And what Neto was doing was he was essentially, a very adventurous left back, a very dynamic left wing back. And the guy he was allowing to move inside was Joao Felix, who we know was not
Hmm.
a wide player, loves sort of being close to the center forward. So
Yeah.
that's how Portugal played it. They did a 3-2-4-1 kind of situation where this wide man was able to stretch the pitch and basically allow players to drift inside. And I think that's something maybe Maresca tried with Malo Gusto against Manchester City and Nkunku and basically Kieran Dewsbury Hall played on the left wing that day. And he drifted in and became sort of like a 8-10 in that hole. So maybe that's what Nkunku's ideal role is in that spot where you're not allowing him to do the heavy lifting that you want out of possession. And it's actually Neto who takes over those responsibilities, who's, I would say, a lot more hardworking than Nkunku is in those defensive aspects. So that's one thing for me. Like directness is 100% a major plus.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you look at the profile of player that we have in our squad. They're all kind of different. You would say that, especially on the left, that Raheem Sterling is pretty direct in the fact that he can take on players and everything. You'd like to see him get into scoring positions a little bit more and do more with those scoring positions, but by and large, he is a little bit more tricky than just like pure pace and power of Mudryk. On the right side, you have Madueke and Palmer, who have bags of tricks, although Palmer has many more tricks and is much more two-footed than Madueke is. And then you have a player like Nkunku, who has his own version of this, but largely can operate in tight spaces and make the right run at the right time. So, which player, from a pure directness standpoint, does Neto resemble, and or just does he beat them all in the way that he operates?
Yes, certainly. I think 1v1 wise, he's regularly shown that he can beat PL level opposition. I think that's the standout thing. With Mudryk, obviously, you've seen it do it. You see it against like Ukrainian opposition, where, with all due respect to the league, it goes like of several notches below. But this guy's been, taking on very, very good defenders and beating them. There was this game under Tuchel's tenure, and I think Brees was playing at left back, and Neto skinned him like a couple of times. Absolutely left him, you know, um, in dust a couple of times, and that's when you knew this guy's like an incredible 1v1 threat. He's able to offer again a very unique perspective in terms of being able to go on his stronger side to cut in, but also like do a step over and burst and explode on his right hand side. So a very good two-way threat, two-way 1v1 threat. So in terms of like the 1v1 issues, he reminds me of the best. I look at somebody like a Jeremy Doku, and he generally gives me the heebie-jeebies, like somebody who's a very, very good two-way threat. You can two-footed, can go either side on either wing. And Neto, when he's fully fit, I would put him in the same category. Maybe a little raw in his decision making, can be a little too overzealous.
Okay.
Can see 2v2, 3v3s, and sorry, 2v1s and 3v1s, and he'll still try to dribble through. So maybe a little, fountain of youth kind of exuberant, but yeah, still very talented at what he does. So yeah, I think
Sam.
again, you want that in your winger, right? You want that zeal
Oh
and that
yeah.
fearlessness. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, at 24, he's one of the older players in the squad, though, Sam. I mean, this is an elder statesman of sorts. I mean, come on.
In 2 years, he'll be asking for his pension, I guess. But yeah, he's definitely
Well, I mean,
he's definitely around.
you talk about his one on ones, right? And you're right. Like, you do want a player, especially of his now caliber, right? He's making the move to Chelsea, and even though Chelsea have not been Chelsea for some time, Chelsea are still Chelsea. So you'd want him to come in with I'm going to use the word arrogance here in the best possible way. You would want a player of his caliber to come in with some arrogance and go, I don't care if you're Reece James. I don't care if you're Kyle Walker. I'm going to attack you either way, and I'm going to go straight at you. And I think I'm going to be good enough to beat you.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, again, another point that we'll mention later on in terms of like why I think his ceiling has been capped. And when you ask me for a player comp, I don't want to compare this stylistically, but I will offer a very controversial opinion in terms of, you know, what I think the situations like this. I think Arsenal looked at Kai Havertz and saw the underlyings and said, this works better. And I'll tell you why. Okay. So
Whoa, whoa!
when you
You're
look,
you're scaring
yeah.
people now, Sam. Come on.
No, no. So let's be very honest about it. You know, Havertz was here for 3.5 years, and we all expected big things from him. And he promised in glimpses, and more often than not, he underwhelmed. And like it or not, at Arsenal, he did still have like a pretty poor start. But then he grew into his game. He's been a very good presence for them. You ask Arsenal fans, and they genuinely think he's been a very good addition. In the Euros, he started well again, like when the Chelsea route completely disappeared. But Arsenal fans in general are quite happy with him. You look at Pedro Neto and you look at his numbers, and the first instinct, is to say, why? Like, why are we signing a player for 60 million when he's not crossed 11 goals or assists in his entire career? He's still not crossed the 5 goal mark. So why exactly are you going for him? But the argument I would make is like as somebody like an Arsenal that's a couple of years ahead in their project and with players that are established, you're looking at Wolves, where he's been for 5 years, and they've crossed the 50 goal mark in the league twice in those 5 years. In the other 3 seasons, they did not cross 40. So you have a winger, a 1v1 demon who's in a side that's struggling to score 40 goals. And you're looking at it and saying, what if I put him around better players in a side that's able to offer more quality? Can you scale that up? Again, I'm not saying this is sound logic. It's a risk. You're taking a major risk in saying this is how the talent
Yeah.
scales up. But that's how transfers are done. You look at something that another team has and you try and figure out if you plug and play it here, how does that go? And maybe like that's what the recruitment hierarchy saw, that a player who's in an underperforming team, one of the best players regularly over the 4 years, 5 years when he's been available, and you're saying he elevates what we have. So that's where I would place him.
You talked about the versatility piece, which I think is next on your scouting report here, and I mentioned all the positions playing for Wolves, which have historically kind of finished in that between 11th and 15th sort of range in the league, and so I think struggling at times is the right call. I think they were a little bit better last year under Gary O'Neill, but he has played in a bunch of different positions, and I think he's been asked to for a very number of reasons, right, Sam? Through injuries or because they've added, maybe a center forward. He got pushed back out to the winger role. Chelsea are a team that have had significant injuries to key players in the attack, who right now have, I think they've, in the briefing around Pedro Neto, looked at him as a Swiss Army knife, i.e., able to pull out the right tool for the right sort of situation and be flexible. Um, do you see Chelsea using him in the same sort of way that Wolves did, or do you feel like he will really need to focus in one particular area as you think about his versatility?
Yeah, I wish I could read Maresca's mind here and tell you that, this is how it's
I don't know
going
if
to
you want
happen.
to read anyone's mind, Sam. That's
No, but yeah, we did mention the center forward issue, and he has played as a center forward, albeit like in a very, very fluid rotating front three. So you've got
yep.
Wang Hee-chan and you've got like Matheus Cunha behind him, and both of them used to interchange positions with him. So he would go from right wing to left wing. And again, like I would say that contributed to his effectiveness because it made it hard to mark. And there was a lot of freedom for that front three to interpret how they wanted to play, which again you will have under Maresca. Today we saw Raheem Sterling, Mikhailo Mudryk go from left wing end up somewhere at like central attacking midfielder inside the box and like three attackers on the right wing and nobody on the left wing. So, you do envision him as a highly fluid attacker who can pick the spaces that he wants and create a lot of havoc. And in that sense, I think he works. He's able to offer you multi-dimensional threat across the 5 lanes. I've again been looking at him very closely, and I thought he was like a very on-ball kind of winger, but his movement has surprised me. I've seen him as not just a guy who's drop in and wants to receive the ball, but he's also actively pushing the last line. He's moving and he's getting on the blind side of defenders. And I was quite honestly surprised when I was prepping for this pod to see, okay, he's got the more nitty-gritty aspects of center forward play also in terms of how to make space inside the box, which is always nice to see. And it can be deceiving even for me because I look at his height and I look at the other things and I'm like, he's not good in the air, but he's a pretty good header of the ball. Can't jump, but his heading is good. So yeah, a lot of surprises there in very, very good ways. So I do think like the Swiss Army knife in terms of being versatile across the front three will be good. I don't know if Maresca is brave enough to say Jackson's not fit. Let's start with Neto at center forward. I don't know if that happens.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Mark Guiu, welcome to Chelsea. You're going to start your first Premier League game against Man City. Yikes! No, I think the runs in behind. That's an interesting part of where I'm like most curious about how this attack eventually evolves, Sam. And I'll just take the Neto example as one thing, but we saw last year that in particular most of our attacking talent wants the ball into feet so that they can run with it, right? Nico Jackson is maybe the exception to that rule, who made a ton of outstanding and unselfish runs last year to open up spaces for other players like uh, Palmer and Kunku or Madueke or anyone else, Sterling. Um, what I've seen from Maresca's system so far is we need at least one more player to make those runs, to stretch the defense, to allow more space in behind for the eights or someone like Palmer cutting in, so not everything's so squished. Do you feel like he could regularly make some of those unselfish runs to open up space, or is it like a kind of situational thing from the tape that you've watched?
Yeah, I do think it's a part of his arsenal. I don't think it's a dominating part of his skill set. Neto does make some good runs. Again, like more off the shoulder kind, so he'll wait time for his run, and because he's quite quick, he's happy to start like a yard behind the last line and then zip in behind, but not regularly. Even at wing back, you're looking for. He always does like full back kind of stuff where he's holding with, he'll accept, and then from the touchline, he'll try to burst forward and take players 1v1. So off ball stuff is there, not dominant. So would be sorry to disappoint, but yeah, very on ball.
Let's talk about two more strengths before we go to our final break. You mentioned set pieces. These are two dominant focuses of Chelsea's attack, especially cutbacks in possession, and then our new set piece coach Bernardo Cueva coming in with some unique, opportunities on set pieces to maximize what Chelsea can do from a goal scoring output this season. Do you think he fits into both of those areas of focus well, or is he going to have to improve on what he's doing on either one of those?
No, I think he's very good. Just been again looking at, so Sarabia was somebody who was taking a lot of direct, indirect free kicks last season. Again, left-footed, very, very good. But Neto was, whenever Sarabia was on the bench, he was sort of earmarked as the set piece taker. I thought his deliveries were excellent. Again, quite near post, center of the box, whipped. He's also got a lovely dinked kind of, crossing technique where it sort of hangs in the air. And especially if you've got a physical backline, something like a Wolves does with Dawson, who at I think 37, 38 is still one of the best attackers of the box, in terms of set pieces.
Oh yeah.
They also had Kilman, who's again a tall boy and can basically give you that aerial threat. So he used to dink those set pieces in, those corners in, and just hang it there at the perfect height for people to head in. And when you've got the height that we do in the back line now, then there is definitely reason for optimism that he can provide that kind of service. He's also like, at least in like previous seasons, he's promised in terms of being like a very, I would say, devastating threat. So I think in 2021 he was like the fourth most prolific crosser into the box. At one point, I think he ranked super high on um, deliveries into the box. I don't know if it was like third or fourth. So again, somebody who's evolved on that. Also, a lot of the games that I watched this season, he was using his right foot to cut back, and pretty accurate ones too, Nick. I mean, he was placing it into space for people to run onto. Again, I would encourage people to go, unfortunately, to go and watch the 4-2 humbling that we had against Wolves, and he actually set up like two goals. I don't think he got to the credit for one, but one was basically for Ait Nori on his right foot. He cut inside and just placed it wonderfully, like grounded, easy to hit in the middle of the box. So is able to offer you that threat from either side, from his left and right foot. So the threat is there, Nick. And one other thing that I would like to point out is he was on the cusp of a breakout season before he got injured. In his first 10 league games, he was on 7 assists, which is quite freaky, to be honest. And then
Yeah.
after that, he basically missed a lot of the season, and then he came back and only offered two more assists in the rest of the games that he played. So the numbers are very encouraging, and hopefully, if we can keep him fit, then he breaks through that 9 assist mark and climbs further forward. And if you give him somebody like a Cueva with like set piece issues and opportunities to increase that tally, then he can again be a very good uh, presence there.
Excellent. Well, we are going to take our last ad break, come back, talk about where he can improve. Thank you to the sponsors, and we will be right back. All right, Sam. We couldn't get through a Neto episode without talking about the injuries, and this is kind of the number one can improve slash fingers crossed slash holy shit if he stays healthy could be amazing thing. He missed 12 matches last year through a hamstring injury. 11 matches the year before through a hamstring injury, 27 matches the year before that with an ankle injury, 52 matches with a knee injury the year before that. And then like little, looks like little small niggling injuries, after or before, he really got to Wolves. Injuries are a problem, right? We just learned a couple days ago that Reece James is back on the injury table for a hamstring. We've seen a number of soft tissue injuries at Chelsea pop up over the last 4, 5, 6 seasons. This has been a long running theme with us. We have signed players like Christopher Nkunku who are coming off of an injury. And, Romeo Lavia, for example, coming off an injury, never quite made it healthy last year. Let's talk about the injuries, man, because it's something that I'm really worried about. And it's you can have all the promise in the world, but if you don't stay healthy, you're never going to be able to show it.
Yeah, availability is the best ability, as they say. So, yeah, the bad news is that he's missed 112 games for Wolves since the 1920 season. That is a lot. That's 3 seasons worth of football, to be honest, if you count like league games. Um, the good news is it's not as bad as Reece, who's missed 172, and Wes, who's missed 180 during the same period. So that just gives you
Astonishing.
the bottom line of, yeah, just
That's
that's
astonishing amount of
staggering.
time off.
Yeah, I mean, 180 games is quite incredible. I didn't know you could play that many games in like 4 years. So, so that's wow. That quite hit me hard when I was sort of going through the numbers. I'm like, this guy, I've messed up somewhere. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
180 games across all competitions. And I'm not counting national team fixtures, which obviously he would have been a part of, because I consider him at peak to be like equal at William Saliba or Upamecano or whoever it is in terms of French centre backs. He would have been that good. So yeah, definitely an issue. And again, he's um, a player who relies a lot on explosiveness, on being extremely quick. So you are, again, every time there's a setback, you're waiting for him to reach that full sharpness before you see the best of him. And I don't want to be, again, like super negative, but Tom Woolward, I think, did um, a piece on like when do wingers, like quick wingers, peak. And the age he came up with was 22. So we're already like 2 years beyond that limit in terms of like wingers who
Mm.
rely on being extremely quick and pace based. So the prerogative here is to keep him fit, to wrap him in satin and cotton wool and just basically preserve him the best we can. If that happens, great. But like the history really is not encouraging. And we've made that mistake before multiple times. We saw red flags there, more red flags than a communist gathering, and then we still said, okay, we'll just go and take the risk anyway. So
Your phrasing is always just unbelievable. I mean, look, injuries are going to be something we have to watch, and it's why the whole medical staff has been essentially replaced at Chelsea. You have two more things: output, total, outputs in terms of goal scoring and assisting and all that sort of stuff, and then defensive actions.
yeah, output we've already talked about. I've also given you like an addendum saying that, pretty not so good Wolves side in terms of output. So maybe his ceiling was capped a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, again, finishing numbers, big chances created numbers, not as high as you would want from, 60 million signing, especially like from a signing who I think possesses the talent to make those numbers. I genuinely think he's starting to hit a point in his career where he's well-rounded enough to offer that kind of number. But even for Portugal, they still preferred like Rafael Leao versus somebody like him, who's again as good going forward, as unpredictable, but maybe like even better than Leao defending easily. So maybe he's starting to push towards that point in his career where he wants to be the first choice for club and country. So yeah, good time to get him, but can he break through the glass ceiling is the big question. And yeah, defensive actions wise, again, if I look at his what is required from him tactically, then he's good in spells. I would say like there are maybe like a good portion of the game where he's doing his responsibilities. He tracks back diligently, will try and offer support. But there are also games where I've seen a complete lack of, defensive acumen. I'll again point out the Man United game as an example. And Luke Shaw, who's again, when fit, one of the best like marauding fullbacks ever. And Luke Shaw was playing on his side, on the right hand side. And every time Shaw went up, like Neto was found wanting. And multiple times Semedo had to be 2v1, Rashford and Shaw against you. And Neto was dawdling close to the halfway line. And this happened like 3 or 4 times. So he can be very, lackadaisical in spells. And
Yep.
especially in a tactical system where Maresca says your wingers have to man mark the
Yep.
fullbacks and have to be like keep pushing backwards. One has to even slot back in the back five, like Noni has done in preseason. Um, there will be question marks 1 or 2 times, so has to improve that. And his quantity is again poor. His quality is also not that great, so can improve in those respects. But again, if he offers you the right kind of attacking output, those questions will disappear. So
Indeed. Well, that's a wrap on Neto. Again, we're looking forward to seeing when he gets integrated into the attack and where he plays and all the sorts of things. But Sam, thank you for taking the time out of a hectic week to put together a quick scouting special. And look, Chelsea fans, please leave comments. Go subscribe on YouTube. Help us out there. That would be really great. But until next time, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.